All right, I'm back again. You might have thinking that you just saw me, and that's true. Rob Haddock from Dragonfly, but this time we're talking about Solana Infra. We've got a great panel for you, so I'm going to let everybody just start introducing themselves and what you work on and what you do there.
Great. Great to be here. Thanks again, Mark, and everybody for hosting us. This is Chris Hermida. I'm one of the co-founders of Switchboard, and Switchboard is a customizable Oracle network that makes it really easy for applications, users, protocols to bring data on-chain.
I'm Luke Labonte, so I lead solutions at Layer Zero Labs. So solutions is basically helping teams build whatever contract topology and flows they want on the protocol and working with our different products to integrate whatever they want. So yeah, nice to meet everybody.
My name is Jacob Everly. I'm the product lead for Boundless. Boundless is a protocol being developed by Resira that allows any developer on any blockchain to use ZK easily and effectively.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kaita Chernopolska. I'm the head of growth at the Wormhole Foundation. My team supports everybody building on-chain and thinking about interoperability. So whether you're a stablecoin issuer or you're building the next cross-chain lending market, we're here to help.
Awesome. Well, so many of you, or all, I guess all of you, are building really core infra for Solana, but also many of you are building cross-chain. And I'm interested in how you think about navigating or balancing, the struggle, maybe intricacies of Solana versus building cross-chain, and what challenges that has caused for you. Maybe Chris, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think on the Oracle side, it's a little unique in the sense that Oracle architecture has changed quite a bit over the past year, 2 years. Previously, most Oracles operated on a push model, where you basically had chain-specific schedulers pushing or cranking transactions on predetermined bases. That's now really shifted to a pull model where applications and users pull the actual price feed data at the time of the transaction to be used in their protocol. And so on the cross-chain side, that actually makes it a lot easier to integrate in different cross-chain protocols, because the only thing you need to do is deploy sort of these verifier contracts on those other chains and some form sort of payment mechanism as part of that. So on the Oracle front, it's gotten a little easier from the technical side. But in terms of Solana specific, Solana has been a lot of chewing glass. It has improved dramatically over the past 2 years. And it does take a lot of work if you're coming from, say, the EVM ecosystems to sort of get your foot in the door and optimize things. But once you're there, it's a really incredible, powerful ecosystem.
Would you say you're still chewing glass?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Maybe we'll go down the line. I'd love to hear from you as well.
Yeah, similar. We are still chewing glass as well. For us, it's really around, so with Layer Zero being kind of just general cross-chain interoperability, the way that we structured it is that our contracts are immutable. We can never change them. And that forces us to think through design decisions in perpetuity. And so to not, hey, how can we measure twice, cut once? And how do we think through that up front? And with Solana, how do we have full product parity across EVMs, other non-EVMs, right? And so all of those things have to come up front before we even touch any part of the code, and that involves just digging through the VM and at the lowest level, just cutting your teeth and learning as much, if not more, than some of the chain foundations. So for us, it's really kind of getting our hands dirty and really just building out not just the protocol contracts, but all the supporting dev tooling for our protocol for builders to then for them to easily kind of build on what we do. So we kind of do that ahead of time for them as much as we can. But yeah, it's really around just how do we create product parity across every chain. And Solana is just its own beast in that, right? So that's just, our experience.
Yeah, I would say we've chewed a little less glass, actually.
Congratulations.
Our team is full Rust dev from the beginning, so it's been a much easier transition. And a nice thing about ZK systems is a lot of the logic for these systems lives off-chain, right? So we have a ZK VM that you run off-chain and you generate proofs off-chain. And the on-chain piece is actually quite small. I think we also might have lucked out that we didn't have to do any transaction splitting. A proof is able to go through in one transaction, which has been really nice. I think, a more pain area that we've had is, we've had a lot of adoption in the Ethereum ecosystem, and really the adoption is scalability, much more execution at a cheaper cost, a roll-up that I'm sure everyone's familiar with. And Solana is a little bit different, right? So on Ethereum, execution is expensive, state storage is cheap. On Solana, it's the opposite. So we're still working out some prototypes, but I do think that ZK can sort of take the cheap execution that Solana has and start to benefit more scalability on the storage side.
Yeah, I think out of all of us on stage, I think my gums are bleeding the most right now. We've been chewing glass for almost 5 years now in the Solana ecosystem. For those who don't know, Wormhole was actually built as the original bridge between Ethereum and Solana. So we've been along for the whole ride. So I think Luke's exactly right. I think feature parity is the biggest thing that we want to accomplish because we work with developers who work across so many different VMs. So EVM is the most obvious, growing ecosystem, but Cosmos ecosystems, all these new L1s that are, building and creating their own, different runtimes and iterating on the blockchain level. And everything that we build is to ensure that developers who want to go cross-chain can do it as seamlessly and as simply as possible. And so that their users, as they start to build out tooling and user flows, that their users have as easy of an experience as possible.
All right, so it sounds like there's been a lot of pain up here. Would love to understand a little bit, how can that pain get solved? What needs to happen at the SVM or at the foundation? Who can solve it and how? Maybe Katya, as someone who's self-proclaimed as bleeding the most, can maybe start with you.
Yeah, I think actually what I'll say is I think you're exactly right. Over the last 2 years, it's the ecosystem or the Oracle ecosystem has changed. So has Solana, right? Like I think the Solana tooling has really improved over the last few years. There's still sometimes rogue moments where programs are introduced and maybe they're not always backwards compatible. So working through with teams to make sure that all upgrades that come down the line are cohesive with the current architecture we have. That's always really important. But I think the tooling really has improved over the last few years. And my favorite thing about the Solana ecosystem is that you can't complain without giving an answer or like giving your recommendation on what needs to be improved. That's what I think is so special about Solana is everybody's working towards resolving the issues. Nobody wants to be chewing glass. We're all aware of it, and everybody's working fairly collaboratively to make sure that gets resolved.
Anybody want to add? Luke?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the collaboration piece, like with the chain foundations themselves, and then some specific applications within each ecosystem. I feel like there's like one or two within each chain ecosystem that like almost know it better than the chain teams themselves. They're super helpful and like they love to help, especially like on weekends, it seems. So it's really kind of just a community effort coming together and like sharing and going through that together. And like that also like builds developer community where it's like, how do you differentiate your developer community versus other EVM chains that like kind of that all is like pretty much the same across a number of different ones. But with Solana, it's like very unique. And so I think that just like actually brings a lot of people together. And so for us, it's truly around the collaboration of like, how do we just like, we're all in it together. How do we make it all better?
So maybe I'll ask a question that will not be as popular in this room. But so there's a lot of talk about, SVM and Solana being hard to work with. Obviously, it's getting better, and you guys have both said that. There's also I think a belief out in the market that Solana has a lot of tailwinds, and I think that's very clear that it's accelerating quite quickly, in part because of the infrastructure and the ability to be kind of low latency, high throughput, and have better trading and user experience. Is there a world in which there's a middle ground, and that's not Solana, and it's not kind of the EVM that exists today? Do you see someone else winning? I don't know. Maybe we'll start with Jacob.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's advantages to using like different virtual machines. Not to shill, but like, I mean, with Boundless, like you can use any ZKSX. You can also use any virtual machine. Like you could write an application that settles to Solana that uses MoveVM. I think there's reasons to use MoveVM. I think there's some nice properties of Solana virtual machine EVM. So I think it's really hard to tell right now, like who's gonna win. I think people constantly point to like the EVM as JavaScript. I mean, not a lot of people use JavaScript anymore, to be honest.
Sure.
So like, it's really hard to tell right now. Big fan of like VM agnostic approaches.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it depends on the applications. And I think most people in Solana would probably actually agree with that, right? That ultimately it's going to depend on if other chains or other ecosystems can build these killer apps that onboard the masses and ultimately end up generating a ton of value for their users. The thing I'd say is that the Sol community in particular is very cognizant of that and is constantly working to improve sort of the core fundamental tooling and infrastructure versus, I think, kicking the can down the road that we've seen in other cases.
Yep. So maybe on that point, what is or what was the first thing that drew you, Chris, to building within the Solana ecosystem relative to others? And how do you think about prioritization for what you do across all the different ecosystems?
Yeah. I mean, for us, when we started, it was very much we had a belief in high performance chains and ecosystems really ultimately going to be the ones that succeed from a user experience perspective. Nobody wants to pay massive transaction fees for a TX. And this was, right after DeFi summer when, people were paying $100, $200, $300 for a TX on ETH, and it just clearly wasn't sustainable. For us, it was that kind of an obvious. And then, at the time evaluating different chains, it kind of became clear Sol was a great first start for us. Now, what I would say is that we are neutral infrastructure. Solana is where our core logic sits, but Switchboard is usable on basically any environment. EVM, SVM, Move, Cairo with Starknet, and a bunch of others.
Luke, want to add?
Yeah, so for us, I mean, ultimately, I think it depends on where you sit in the stack, but for us, like, we're pure infrastructure, so you have to be, like, pushed by the market forces. And so for us, chain expansion really comes down to a business decision of, like, is this where we should be spending our engineering resource time? Is there user demand there? Is this something you think we will pay off, right? And so for us, I mean, it's abundantly clear over the last few years that Solana was and is worth sinking time and resources in creating that ecosystem of developers, like creating more tooling for that ecosystem of developers. So for us, it's just purely a business decision. We joke, but the person who on our business development team who does all of our chain expansion could probably run his own venture firm at this point because he has to place bets and kind of put his name by it. So, but yeah, it really comes down to a business decision.
I'd be interested, Katya, your perspective as well. Starting on Solana and now going to other ecosystems, how do you decide where to spend your time?
Yeah, we've been continuing to iterate on the contracts that we initially launched 4 years ago because it's not the same Solana it was so long ago. But I think my favorite way to share how we think about prioritization and why we continue to be such huge Solana supporters and we're so involved in that ecosystem is because the best way to see where real users are is to actually look on chain and see where the cross-chain volumes are. I think that's really indicative of where users are and where on-chain activity is happening. I think it's really easy to, watch where mercenary capital is going, if there's a really awesome incentives program on some chain or, there's a lot of hype. But day in, day out, where real users are transacting and moving their tokens is where we want to continue to double down on. And so a lot of the Solana projects that we work on with continue to grow, continue to iterate. We work with them to figure out how they are thinking about their cross-chain needs, how they're thinking about growing in different ecosystems, and honestly, more than anything, how many external teams want to be now expanding and growing on Solana. So we see a ton of excitement from both the developer side and also the organic user side to continue to support that ecosystem, and I think we'll always be there.
So Solana is now going through, as we all know, this change in transaction prioritization and the fee markets. How is that affecting your guys' protocol specifically, and how do you expect it to change, or if at all, just the Solana ecosystem itself? Maybe we'll go down the line, but we'll start with you, Katya.
I think for us, I don't know how it'll impact us today. I think it's something that we're actually working on upgrades to our core Solana contracts today as part of the ever-changing Solana eco. I think not much will change. Our objective will be to keep as much feature parity with existing integrators who are live on Solana today to make sure that nothing breaks in this change. I'll leave that there.
Yeah, for us, if you look at sort of the network extension frameworks that are starting to pop up, it makes them a lot more usable. right? Like if you can't sequence transactions, like atomic composability and synchronous stuff like that is very difficult. So excited for that. Additionally, Solana is very unique for ZK actually. Normally you have to like do this wrapper to fit on chain. Solana is actually the only blockchain I know of right now that can verify a Stark directly on chain, which reduces latency, which also helps network extensions, and with prioritization and correct sequencing, be much more usable as well.
Yeah, for us, it's probably less on the protocol, and it's more around the gas abstraction service that we run. So on every chain, with Layer 0 today, like if I'm a user, I want to do a transaction, I pay like the entire message up front in source chain, gas, and we'll price the destination. You don't have to sign. We can airdrop you gas on destination. To do that accurately, we have to quote the spreads like pretty tightly across different chains. So like going ETH to Solana, I have to price basically the Solana fee inclusive into the ETH on behalf of the user, and like how do we not actually lose money on that? And so with the upgrade, it allows us to actually price more accurately. And so to your point about composability, so bridging A to B is just one transaction, but like you can pack it, you can leg those together. Like I want to go A, B, do some transaction, another transaction on B, and go back to A. And so you can do that composed flow, but you have to quote the user the entirety of that flow. And so if you can quote the user more accurately on the gas, it's just a better user experience, and like that service, you won't lose money. So for us, it's actually like pretty helpful in the sense of like how do we make that experience better for developers and also their users.
Yeah, I mean, for us as an on-demand Oracle, it's the end user paying the gas fees, so it really just helps our end users and the protocols that we work with in terms of getting more TXs, more clarity on it, cheaper fees, and hopefully fewer transactions dropped.
When you talk to your customers and your protocols, it sounds like there's a lot of excitement about it. But what is the negative side, or that you're hearing from people around this change in the fee markets?
Well, if you're referring to SIMD 96,
correct.
It's really more just higher inflation, slightly higher inflation. But I think the net effect is probably going to be minimal. Is kind of my bet. I don't think it's going to have a material shift in things, but you also saw the related vote. I think it was SIMD 28 around reducing sort of validator fees, or I shouldn't say reducing it, making it sort of weighted on a curve depending on stake. And so that's probably going to have, it failed, but if it were to go up for a vote again, would probably have much more of an impact than the priority fee side.
So I think we probably have some builders in the room and on the live stream. If somebody's thinking about building new infrastructure for Solana today, where's their opportunity? Where are their gaps? Where are you guys still seeing a lot of pain points that you think someone else should be able to solve?
I was just going to say, there still is not a good replacement for Clockwork on the scheduling side. So something that's sort of like a Crank or a KeeperBot or a scheduling service. Right now, most protocols either run their own or have some other centralized solution for it. That would be something that I think could be really useful and helpful for the Sol community.
Yeah, I echo that sentiment, please. Built that. We just recently launched a product called MultiGov. We'll be implementing it first for wormhole governance. It allows for cross-chain proposal creation and execution. And that means anybody who will hold the W token and wants to participate in governance on Solana has to, we want to make sure that those votes are counted and those voices are heard. We've had a lot of challenges with crank turners and just making that as seamless of an experience as possible. So actually, if you are building that, please DM me. I'd love to know.
Jacob?
I think there's a lot of interesting stuff to do to sort of bridge Web 2, Web 3. So around account abstraction and wallet and sign in. If someone was to build an SDK where you could sign into your wallet and sign in with a Gmail or your Apple account, I think it's been a huge unlock for some people in the Ethereum ecosystem. It'd be pretty high value for someone to mimic sort of what ZK Sync has done with their account abstraction. Additionally, what Base has sort of done with their SDK, if you could bring that into the Solana ecosystem, I think it'd be really high value.
Luke, anything from you?
Yeah, Jacob took my answer. I was going to say the Web 2 interoperability from there and extracting that away from the larger base of developers. And so on another one is probably wishful thinking. For us, is probably increasing stack depth would be fantastic. So it's I wanted to, and obviously for execution purposes, it is what it is, and kind of working within those parameters. But that also like impacts your design decisions of like how should I actually build this thing and like maybe it's not the best way to build it, but it's like maybe what the limitations require me to build it in a certain way. So for us, like if stack depth was like a little bit bigger or a little bit deeper, it would be great. But yeah, I think Web2 API is something that's like an easy to use SDK across the broader landscape of developers would be massive. Yeah.
Maybe so. Conti and I talked about this a little bit earlier. We were talking a lot about like kind of the institutional flow or the institutional interest that's happening on Solana. For all of you guys, when you talk to kind of end customers or other infrastructure providers that are kind of facing off against those end customers, where are you seeing the most excitement for building in the Solana ecosystem today? Is it on the payment side? Is it asset tokenization? There's a lot of conversation around, it's just like meme coin trading on Solana. What is the most exciting thing that the conversation that you're hearing the most? And how does that potentially differ from, maybe, what the conversation is happening online?
I think the RWAs and the asset tokenization is probably top of mind in terms of noise, mind share, and what I think people are thinking and talking about. The volume and the retail excitement and attention is still very much on new asset creation that is not RWAs, to say the least.
And I think if you're just like somebody new looking at the crypto space, you don't know where to start, but you hear BlackRock's on Solana, you're going to get excited, right? You're going to automatically start to have some level of trust with that network and want to deploy there. So,
but to be fair, though, BlackRock started on Ethereum, right? And
That's
so
true. That's true.
How do you think about that or does that change the conversation for you?
It is an interesting discussion because a lot of these institutions do look at Ethereum first, and it is a lot of discussion between the Solana's architecture versus Ethereum. I think how decentralized, how long-standing Ethereum has been, and how I think the discussion isn't even if Solana and if Ethereum, it's just a matter of when. But I think with how massive the L2 ecosystem is on Ethereum, there's also appetite for those institutions to start on ETH, grow within the EVM, and then explore Solana. But yeah, I think institutions are on chain. They're not coming. They're here today. But also payments is just such a huge use case. It also makes all of these tokenization efforts really productive, right? You put RWAs on chain, you put it as collateral for a new stablecoin. That stablecoin can be used by merchants across all these different networks. Solana is just really where we're seeing a ton of adoption for that specifically.
So I want to pull on that thread a little bit because there's a lot of these institutions, like you said, they started on Ethereum, then it's as Solana, but sometimes it's not right away too. There might be an L2 or something like that. Why do you think that's the priority or the way the latest people are coming in to Ethereum first versus Solana?
I mean, can you find me a Solana developer? I'm asking for myself, but also I think we look at the developer ecosystem and the developers who are here are really, really passionate and really, really talented, and oftentimes building their own protocols, right? So I think the EVM has had an easier onboarding experiences for new developers. I think it's just tougher for people to upskill and get comfortable with the blockchain architecture of Solana. It's very unique and it's not particularly scalable. Like the SVM is, Solana's the only real network that has a ton of traction with the SVM. EVM, you can launch on Ethereum, OP. You can use the same developer for that. So I think it really is just, can we get a Solana guy in the room at any of these institutions?
Anybody want to add to that?
I think I actually differ a little bit. I don't even think it's developer stuff. I think it's relationships. Like Ethereum has dedicated so many teams at the EF and across the ecosystem, like roll-up ecosystems, have just dedicated a lot of time of building relationships with BlackRock institutions. If you want them to deploy on your chain, it's a 2-3 year sales cycle, and you have to dedicate that and slowly walk them through everything. And I don't know how many teams have done that on Solana just yet. Yeah,
I want to echo that. I think it's relationships, and I actually don't think it has any outside of InfoSec, checks. I don't think it has anything to do with the developer ecosystem at all. I think it has everything to do with just they look at it as a distribution channel for their product, right? And how can they get their product into more hands as possible? And that's kind of how they're looking at each of these chains. So obviously Solana has that specifically for retail. okay, do you have other retail B2C providers? They have millions of users. Like, is this an extension of what they're already providing them today? And then they'll kind of look to others to cut their teeth of like, we want to be here, we want these users, we'll just kind of go through that pain. And then, yeah, I think on the more B2B institutional, it's like heavy relationships, like education, but also like kind of getting their team up to speed and being able to be comfortable with what's going on.
Do you think, and maybe for both of you, is that feedback for the foundation itself at Solana, or is that the applications haven't done a great job at building those relationships? Why do you think that is?
I'm not. I talked to some very technical people at the foundation, so I can't speak that broadly. This is just coming from my experience of seeing which teams have had great institutional traction. They hire people from TradFi, they stick an office in FIDA in NYC, they integrate, they go to all their events, and it's just really a long sales cycle. I think a great example, and someone that's done this quite well actually, is Avalanche. They have a 10, 15 person institutional team. They've been on this sales cycle for like 2-3, building these relationships with like JP Morgan and BlackRock and Citibank for 4 or 5 years now, and they're just now getting past POCs, right, and deploying real assets.
Luke, you have anything to add?
Yeah, no, I echo that. I mean, my time before Layer Zero, before contending, was at IBM when I first started my career, were like 4 or 5 years, and that was like 2016, 2017, enterprise blockchain days, like blockchain, not Bitcoin, and it was like it was way too early back then for that, but like the sales cycles are extremely long because it's selling, but it's also educating at the same time. And it's like, you're selling, but you're also advising them and like making sure they understand and become trust partners. So it's like a different way of like going through the sales cycle, but it's a journey, right? And so you have to go and put the time and effort into that journey with the people that matter and ultimately people that you want to be your customers.
Oh, come on, guys. Such a disservice to Solana Foundation.
No, they're great. They're great. They're great.
Soon. I think
Anatoly did a great job. Like I watched him a few weeks ago, and he understands the business aspect of it. Of like, yes, he's like a technical background, obviously built Solana, but he's like, if the user experience and the business case is good enough, the tech will follow. Like people will go through that pain to like build something that is used by millions of users, right? And so he understands that unlock, and I think the Solana Foundation, more so than most of the EVM community, is right about this and has the right way of thinking. So not all bad. No, I think like Solana Foundation did a fantastic job.
Yeah. Sounds like you agree, Chris. Absolutely. Yeah. So maybe last question. I'd like to hear from each of you. What is your most controversial opinion about the future of crypto on Solana? Start with you, Chris.
I mean, I'll start. I think most infra are going to either build end applications or become applications. And, we have a lot of bridges here. I think, you see dBridge. dBridge is doing, I think, $20 million a year in fees from their intent-based swaps. It's very easy to see, other bridges moving in that same direction with the end product that end users actually see and touch. And I think you'll see more of that just across the stack in general, whether it's new L1s focusing and starting off by actually building and incubating their own dApps, or partnering very closely with others for end consumer applications and really growing with them.
Is this you announcing your retail app?
It is not.
Okay, all right. Maybe we'll go down the line.
I honestly don't think the developer experience should get better. Honestly, I think like it builds community.
Eat more glass.
It builds community, and like it kind of weeds out the people that aren't serious, right? Like they're not going to go through that pain to build something that like they kind of want to build and they just like want to get out to market. Or I think like going through the pain together, like developers will want to like the unlock is a lot of the user base, and like going through the pain is like building something that matters for that community and for the users. And so I think it's a natural filtering process of like, how can we filter through like and keep the good stuff and keep the good application builders, and then tighten the community around them to help each other. And then we could just build the Web 2 APIs on top and like we'll be fine. But yeah, that's my hot take.
That's a crazy hot take. Mine would be that there's no way a single computer is going to scale Web3. It's not how the internet works. There's like tens of millions of servers. There's definitely more than 3 use cases, and comparing like Visa's transactions to a Solana transaction is always a little bizarre to me.
I don't know if that's that hot of a take, to be honest.
What?
I don't know if that's that hot of a take.
Okay, well, I apologize, but don't be like Ethereum was in 21, right? Like, don't dismiss like new technology. Of course, I believe in ZK a lot and like this sort of like multi-server thing. I think Solana is sort of looking into how to become a better layer for like ZK rollups, and I'm a huge fan of that, of course. But yeah, don't be like closed-minded like Ethereum did in 21 and allow someone else to catch up to you.
Are network extensions L2s?
No, I think they're fundamentally like very different doing something. So yeah, the ETH maxis can yell at you, but I accept the new name.
Okay.
Wow, a lot of hot takes. Mine's shouldn't be a hot take, but it sounds like it might be. Interop isn't solved. I think we hear that sentiment a lot on Twitter. I know it's, people have been piling onto that narrative. If Interop was solved, we wouldn't have so many issues with token transfers, and we wouldn't have 50 different intense infrastructures, built on top. I think we're entering this era of consolidation and verticalization. And I think that's going to really change the way you see applications and infrastructure build.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone, and thanks for all of our listeners and watchers.